Good afternoon, attendees, panelists. My name is Shamika Leacock with the James Beard Foundation. Welcome to the Queer All Year webinar series in collaboration with the Queer Food Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. A little bit about the James Beard Foundation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to celebrate and support and elevate the people behind America's food culture and champion a standard of good food anchored in talent, equity, and sustainability. If you're interested in learning about our JBF programs, initiatives, and events, please visit us at jamesbeard.org and platformbyjbf.org. This month, we're featuring the people behind queer farming and farms. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to Vanessa Parrish, the co-founder, executive director of the Queer Food Foundation and chef. But before I do so, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the James Beard Foundation website and our virtual education library for future reference and use if you want to tune back in and watch and join us a little bit later. So I'm kicking it over to Vanessa Parrish.
Thanks, Shamika. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to our fall installment of Queer All Year with JBF. We have Alex Walsh here. He's going to be our amazing moderator, QFF advisory member. Really excited for you all to learn something, hear something. I know I am. But just a quick hello, for those who don't know about QFF, we are a community organization, fiscally sponsored, here to serve, protect, elevate, and fund queer food spaces. And that includes agriculture as well. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Hope you send in your questions. Please send in as many questions as possible. We're going to have a nice Q&A. So this is now your chance. We'll also send out some information. We'll have the virtual library link shortly, probably a little bit after. So if you want to share, go back, ask more questions, you'll be able to reach out to our lovely, amazing panelists. But thank you so much for being here on behalf of QFF and enjoy the conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm Alex Walsh. I'm a Queer Food Foundation Advisory Board member. My pronouns are he, him. I am coming to you from my porch in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Osage, and Shawnee peoples. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We've got our 4 panelists here. I'm gonna just read through their names, organizations, and they're gonna tell you a little bit about themselves, their identities, and how they got into farming. We have Chalchi with the Queer Farmer Network, Noah Woodley with Rocksteady Farm, Monti Lawson with Catalyst Collaborative Farm, and Jasmyn Story with Freedom Farm Azul. So I'll let them take it away and introduce themselves from here.
I'm first. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Chalchiuhkoatl Cardos. Bishabelesh in la Koob Chalchiuhkoatl. I greet you in my ancestral language that I am relearning, which is Mayat'an, the language of the Maya of the Yucatan Peninsula, also known as Mayab. And my pronouns are they, them in English, and ella in Spanish. And my heart is beating fast. Thank you for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. A little bit about my identities and how I got into farming. I am a parent, I'm a poet, I'm a birth worker. I identify as a cultural web worker, tending the cultural webs with my siblings, queer and trans, BIPOC siblings, two-spirit siblings, here at Minowakin, which is the original name, one of the original names of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest. And here we are at the southwest shores of Iningwe, Wigitchigami, also known as Lake Michigan. And here is Hochangra, Bodewadmi, Mamacheta, and Black Liberator lands. This is where I was raised, where I was born, and where I'm currently rooted. And I got into working with the earth through becoming a parent and through becoming then a birth worker, and then through becoming a medicine maker who wanted to tend the garden and grow the medicines that I would prepare for a community. And that's has led into my work with We Have Always Been Related, which is a collective of two-spirit, queer, trans, BIPOC earth workers of many generations. And it has led to my work with the Queer Farmer Network, which is a hub, a network started in the Midwest for queer farmers, rural and urban. And we actually just 2 weeks ago hosted our first ever BIPOC Queer Farmer Convergence in what's known as Osceola, Wisconsin. And so we gathered there on the Mud Lake, and had a weekend of sleeping in the forest and playing native games and eating delicious food prepared by two Anishinaabe relatives. And it was really delightful. So thank you for welcoming me here, and I'll pass it to our next relative.
Thank you, Chalchi. Hi, all. Grateful for your presence today. My name is Noah. I use they, them pronouns, ella en español. Right now, I am calling in from Berlin. I am here in building this web network of land autonomy and anti-capitalist relations, and acknowledging that this is the belly of one of the beasts, one of the imperial beasts. So that is the work I'm up to here right now. I'm going to read you a modified version of my bio. So bear with me as I try to make this work for verbal speaking. But I am a farmer, naturalist, and body worker, placemaker, believing that land is the portal to the liberation and belonging that we seek. I currently farm at a queer cooperative vegetable farm called Rock City Farm along the Mahicantuck River in the Schaghticoke Nation territory, also known as the Hudson River Valley, land that both Indigenous and forcibly displaced Black people have tended for generations. I work with my community's yearnings to be in deeper kinship with ecological systems and with earth-based education, biological wisdom, and anatomical relations. In this work, we build up our human and other than human ecosystems. This freedom work emerges from my desire for collective autonomy through food and land sovereignty, which I believe to be a practice of pleasure and one of presence as well. My soil tending journey began in the old growth temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, where I spent most of my childhood. And in this predominantly white space, this very poisonous space and community, my relationship with the earth was one of the only ones I was held by. It was with the pines and moss and lichen and the coastline of the Pacific that offered the kinship that I needed to feel safe. Within this growing land relationship, I began to feel closer to my ancestors, transcestors, siblings, healers, and stewards of the soil, and felt a sacred calling to care to the land in a more intentional way. I believe Black trans earth tending in this moment is world building and a practice in fugitivity, as we are simultaneously historians and futurists that are midwifing liberation. We are all birth workers in a sense through land autonomy and agency. Together, we are creating a web of wombs by supporting and sharing wisdom with other QTPOC that are navigating their land stewardship and farming journeys. And we understand that our safety will be reimagined within the collective with mycelic ecosystems of support. And with that, I will pass it to Monti.
Okay, thanks, Noah. That's a little intense to go after, but I will try. My name is Monti Lawson. I use he, him pronouns. I actually farm at the land right next to Rocksteady, so we can kind of count Noah's land acknowledgement as mine. So yeah, a little bit of background about myself. I was an Army brat growing up, but mainly lived in New York. Well, I lived in New York City for the longest period of all the places, but kind of consider Virginia my hometown. Share that as context of like I moved up to New York City to work in fundraising and like political advocacy, and was like learned how to farm as like an escape from that. And the person who actually taught me how to farm in New York City is one of the co-founders of Rocksteady, named Maggie Cheney. So it's just kind of wild that I ended up at a farm upstate, literally right next door to like Rocksteady. So I can kind of tease Noah because we've been able to build up a very beautiful sibling relationship in every sense of the word. Very thankful for our partnership. So yeah, a little bit more is I'm an active member of a couple of different coalition groups. One of them being Black Farmers United of New York State, where that houses a lot of like the general advocacy around like Farm Bill and like legislative policies on the state level. And then Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which is a space more focused on like making sure that people who look like me have access to land, but that's like only the first step. It's like once you get access to that land, what are the supports that you need to like not just maintain, but to thrive? So like that's kind of the space that I tend to be in. And I think that's enough for now. So I'll pass it to Jasmyn.
All right, y'all. I'm feeling very warm and very centered as you all have brought your homes into this space. Everyone, I'm Jasmyn Lee Story. Everyone calls me Jazz. My pronouns are they, them, and I normally would be calling in from Muskogee territory in the heart of what was the Muskogee Confederacy in Alabama, Prattville specifically. And I am the founder of Freedom Farm Azul. I have worn many hats. I really, really love the term cultural web weaver. I've never thought about that before, but care is a contagion. And so now I can name in this space, and I would just thank you for my community here for encouraging me to do so, but I am a doula. So I tend to our life process, our transition processes as well. I steward 15 acres, and my relationship to land really started with my grandparents, and a shout out to my great grandparents who stewarded land in Arkansas, where I spent my summers. Really want to give emphasis to my great aunt, my Aunt Naomi, who had me her little bit, short for little bitty, always with her on the farm, following her around, putting fruits and things in my mouth because country kids don't get sick, as she used to tell me. She also said that Pepsi makes you live longer. So, you know, some country advice we take with a grain of salt. And I am also a restorative justice educator, practitioner, transformative justice educator, and practitioner of a decade. And so for me, abolition is something that is deeply and aligned with everything that I do in relationship to the land and community. It is a part of my queer politic. And that brings us to food always, nourishment always, repair always, generative care always. And so I really thank you all for having me. The last thing that I'll say in relationship to operating in rurality is I've just joined the board of the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative, a human rights organization working to improve the lives of Black women and young women. I sit on the board with some of our Black farm elders like Shirley Sherrod, and that always just sends shivers down my spine to say out loud. And so thank you all for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I can't wait to talk more about the work that we're doing at Freedom Farm Azul down in Alabama.
Thank you all for being here and being open and sharing your full selves and your stories with us here today. I'm sure this is something that a lot of us either on the call, panelists listening can kind of relate to in terms of finding community and queer community in food and farming. And for me, at least, I know that those things are, my transness and queerness are inseparable from my food is my expression of all of those things and my identity. And it was finding that community that really helped me explore who I was and feel safe to come into my full self. And I recently discovered the term queering agriculture, and that kind of resonated with me. I was curious if y'all have heard the term. Does it resonate? Or is it just even, is it possible to even separate it out? And then how does that bring all of your identities, bringing that to the work that you do? How does that influence your perspective and shape what you do? And that term cultural web weaver, I wrote that down. I'm going to take that with me from today for sure. So thank you for sharing. Sharing a little bit about how you're
Alex, it seems that your sound changed. Is that true for anyone else?
Yeah, it was hard for me to hear Alex as well. Try again, Alex.
everybody now, like coming through better.
It's better if you can speak up a little bit more or increase the volume. No.
Alex, do you want us to tackle the first question? Would that be helpful?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't hear you. Wait, what's happening? I'm so sorry.
It's
Okay,
okay. Can you hear us now?
anybody hear the question?
Yes. We can hear you, Alex.
Okay, we can hear you. They can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Or I can't hear you. What's going on?
Jasmyn, I actually think that was a wonderful idea that you proposed as Alex works out some of the audio tech. Would you
Okay,
mind?
got it.
Can you hear us, Alex?
Yeah,
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
sorry
Back-
about that.
No worries.
I think that we missed a good amount that last bit you were sharing. If you remember what you were saying, it started to cut out after you said cultural web weaver.
Oh, okay. I think that was most of the question, and my heart is racing now to Chelsea. Yes, thank you for that. Was really grounding to share and how I'm feeling and being in my body. Yeah, just the term queering agriculture. Have you heard that? Does it resonate? And then the perspective, the unique perspective that you bring, how does that influence your work? And if you've found a queer community, family through farming and giving you space to explore all of those identities.
Are we doing the same order, or are we, you know, flowing?
Let's just flow. Everybody jumped in. We're just talking.
Okay, I can hop in. And I know I was last to speak, so I want to acknowledge that. For me, my identity in the work feel tandem. I think that in saying that, you know, a part of my queer identity is also a queer politic. For me, queer politic centers care and community nourishment. A queer politic involves education. And I think that for Freedom Farm Azul, there are 2 to 3 approaches that I think are really informed by my queerness, by queerness in general, by our queer ancestors and elders who've left us blueprints upon blueprints upon blueprints about how to care for each other and do things right and do things on time and to show up and arrive. And so I think the first thing is that we let people watch us build, which I think that piece is important. People are always just like, how many animals do you have? How many crops do you, how much food do you produce? And I'm like, I would love for you to come see. I want you to come see. So in letting people watch as we build, we're actively trying to push against the white supremacy culture practice of perfectionism, against urgency, against progress is bigger and better and more, right? Those 3 tenets of multiple tentacles that is white supremacy culture, we push back against by saying, come see us in our messy, come see us when our hoop house blows down, come see us when the tornado hits, come see us when the sun burns all of our cord, come see us and know that you can do the same, that there is no perfection here. There is no, if I can't have a $1 million farm, I have no farm. There is, if you got a friend and a shovel and some dirt, and some seed.
Yes.
There's so much to do there. I think the other thing is like thinking about accessibility with rurality and land. We have a mantra that is also our checklist, that is also our strategy, which is we always check against, if people come here, will they say that they were loved before they arrived? And that's all of our relatives in this space. Will they say that they were loved before they arrived? From the butterfly to the bird to the person arriving who's been ill for 6 months. If they come here, will they say, I was loved before I was arrived? And so those are things that I believe impact our approach. And then the last piece that I want to share is nourishment. As a young queer kid in Alabama, which was really, really hard, especially pre-internet, how we found each other were meals. How we could gather safely were meals, even if it was at a Waffle House, right? Everybody literally grabbing change. I'll pay for you to have a hash brown. I'll pay for you to have an egg. Because what we could tell people who may be in charge of our care, who may not have been safe for us as young queer people, is that we were going to eat, right? Going to see a movie, going to Rocky Horror, that's different. But if we said we were going to eat, there was often approval. And so for me, queerness has always been about gathering around food. It's always been safety and nourishment. I don't know anything else. My 12-year-old body, if it was me and my friends going to get a smoothie, to sitting late night at any restaurant that wouldn't kick us out, that piece is just really important. So accessibility, thinking about and centering love in all of its practices for all of our relatives. Those are the things that for me are integrated. I don't see myself as queering agriculture. I am queer and I'm from the South and I'm from the rural space. I don't know, I don't know any other place where you'll see gender expansion than the rural South in all different forms. And if you really want to see drag, you'll go to a Southern church on Sunday. I think that it's really, really, really beautiful that that I get to do what I do, and I'm honored. And with that, I pass it.
Does anybody else want to add to that question?
I'll share. Or was Monty, were you gonna share? Okay. There's there's like reflections happening for me. Thank you, Jasmyn.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on my childhood and when I maybe in my memory, in my recollection, recall being most gender expansive, being most free or gender rebel, and then when I began to put those parts of myself away, going into middle school and high school, and the pressures and the societal norms that really took a effect on me. And yes, through working with the land, through working with the plants and the seeds, and being in the garden and being out on land away from the noises of the city where I grew up, I have definitely come to deepen my relationship and understanding with my queerness, with my transness. It's actually been in the last like handful of years that I come to home to myself in these ways that I can clearly identify, because I know that I've always been queer and trans and a little plant sibling, and now I have some of that language, and now I cultivate spaces where we can find each other, because I'm looking for my cutie BIPOC siblings, because it feels so good to be together, and also recognizing that we've always had, despite what colonial narratives may say, we've always had revered positions and we've always stewarded sacred medicines in our communities, and we've always been here. And so we gather and we find one another and we hold space and we tend and we care for one another as we continue to embody these roles and these medicines in our communities, as we continue to regenerate them and as we continue to come home to them. And I think part of the this work for me is also like bringing a lot of love to my younger self, to my tween self, to my teen self, to my childhood little elder self. And I've always felt very at home with the plants. Sometimes with the people, it's more of a challenge, but with the plants and laying on the earth, and hearing all the buzzing, the wings around me, it's always felt very harmonizing and grounding, and like I can breathe a little more easy.
I'll speak to it a little bit next. For me, I don't see queering and land, or queer and land, or queer and land stewardship as unrelated. I think those two things are things that have always had like a sacred interconnection. I think in the ways that our ancestors used traditional ecological methods and knowledge in communalism and farming in relationship to the surrounding ecosystem, that to me is a queer act, to be in connection with the beings that you share your ecosystem with, and to know the patterns of the earth and of the seasons around you. That is the foundation of care and of this like sacred understanding to have with the land. And that to me is a queer method and a queer way to be stewarding land. And yeah, because I believe it all begins with the land. Like, I don't think you can have food sovereignty without first having land sovereignty. I think that having that relationship, that queer relationship to agriculture, to land stewardship, to soil, earth, is essential to get to the autonomous communities' food sovereignty that we want to see for our liberatory future. So, and that for me, being around other queer people doing this work has reinforced that belief and has reminded me of like the rage and the anger and the violence that is sometimes necessary to bring about this revolutionary change. So I am very grateful for being around queer earth workers, because it is about like abundance, pleasure, and nourishment, but it's also about tapping into that rage and that anger that is going to, like, having a balance that is going to emerge change and also sustain for longevity's purposes, because I do think that burnout is quite frequent. And so like seeking joy where we can, but also not losing the passion and the ferocity, which is the basis of why we do this work.
Oh, that's very beautiful. I just like wanted to add, Jazz, like kind of you threw me through a loop with your answer, because I was like, wow, I'm like resonating with like literally word for word.
Me too.
Yeah, just like wanted to like tag on to say that like one of the things that I found so special in doing this work, like the question about like queering agriculture is like a little complicated for me, because I feel like it's like I'm like Black and gay, so it's like, you know, what part of this is like my queerness versus like, you know, ancestral wisdom from from the Black side, for lack of a better term. But just like wouldn't want to name that, like it's something that's so important to me when we have events. In a year and a half, we've had 500 people come to visit and be on this land. And it's something that's like important to me, that like every person feels like they're safe and they have what they need. You know what I mean? Like the first meal, you're making sure that everybody is super full. You know what I mean? No one's like wondering if they're going to go to bed hungry or anything like that. And what's just coming up for me is like, because we are so intentional about building up that community, it's something where like people are constantly coming here and reminding me like, wow, this is so special what you're doing here. And I'm always like, what are you talking about? I'm just doing what comes naturally. And so it's like I have to go to other farms to be like, oh, everyone doesn't do it like this. This does not come naturally to everyone else. So appreciating our community for always showing up for each other.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's pretty incredible what you all have created with your respective communities and your work. And so much of that resonated with me, and I'm sure to the other folks who are on the other siblings and who are on the call with us today. And you all have touched on this a little bit, just that how just thinking and reflecting on access to land, and how that is to the ability to grow your own food, continue your cultural traditions and expressions through food is power, and how farming in and of itself is extractive in terms of land, labor, and there's so much, and the land itself is holding trauma, right? And these systems of oppression, white supremacy, settler colonialism have been removing people from their lands, from their culturally significant foods. And you all are sort of reconnecting and healing with that. And that is so powerful. And just, I don't know if you want to speak to or share on like food sovereignty is a term that is kind of thrown around to encapsulate maybe all of those things. And then what does that mean to you? And what does liberation look like? Like what is the end that we are working towards and fighting for in that work?
I think we're in an age of mushrooms and legumes. And the thing that makes me always think about them when it comes to liberation and food sovereignty and interrupting food violence is that I think as farmers, as queer farmers, as farmers of color, it's not only probably part of our lineage, but it is probably part of our day-to-day, the struggles, the structural barriers to participation and maintaining. I also want to name social and cultural barriers. For Southern farmers, domestic terrorism was another part of what drove people off land. And so when I think about mushrooms and I think about legumes, I think about repair. And I also think about breaking things down so that new things can be built. And so interruption for me looks like, you know, people really gathering and supporting two really big movements happening right now. Find yourself in alignment and solidarity with an indigenous land sovereignty movement near you. Like there's one near you, find it. I think that piece is important. And then the second one around interruption would be land loss. Some of that is traditional with Latina communities, say in Mexico, in Lower Texas, and New Mexico and Arizona. You also see poor white folks struggling with traditional land loss. In Appalachia, and you see Black folk being robbed of land in mass actively right now in your neighborhoods, in your counties that have not supported in repairing issues of air property and land rights. And so really thinking about what things that needs to be interrupted right now, land loss, and then the mushroom piece, like breakdown, build, repair, really thinking about how do we find ourselves in alignment and solidarity with indigenous sovereignty movements so that we can find ourselves in alignment with practices, a process of remembering how to be good stewards, how to be good relatives. And I think those pieces are really crucial and important, interruption and repair.
I can go next. I feel like, you know, when it comes to the policy space, it's something where the training that I've gotten is basically like pick 3 topics and like only focus on those 3, because if we can get into a place of despair when we're trying to tap into all of the things. So share that as context of like, the number one thing that I'm really focusing on right now is like community land trusts and alternative models of like owning land, because it ties into the 2 things that I hear most about, like when people are asking like, how do I like leave New York City to like move upstate? It's like access to affordable land is the number 1 issue, and then access to affordable housing is number 2. And then the third piece that kind of ties it all together that does exist within the capitalist like system is just the idea of like when we're talking to the general public and like eaters and like people that are supporting of us, when we talk about sustainable farming, they're always asking about like if pesticides were used on the food, not if the people who pick the food can afford to buy the food. So I feel like those are kind of like my 3 spaces where I try to stay in the zone there.
I am thinking there's so many facets of this question and this topic, and I'm trying to find the words to what aspect to speak to. And I think I'm thinking about like diaspora, and thinking about what does like food sovereignty look like for people who are in diaspora, who we're not living on our traditional ancestral homelands, and maybe even there's unique challenges to grow our ancestral seeds. And I've been in the last few years trying to bring seeds from where my family is in my yab, and I'm learning a lot very quickly, and you know, like the timing piece, and do they have enough time to flower and then to fruit? And because here we have a cold winter, and at my yab there's not a cold or a winter, and there's things that I would like to prepare, but I don't even know where to source like that specific squash paste from the seed, to make papatzules is something I've been, it feels very comforting to me. And it requires a specific squash seed that is made into a paste. And also epazote, which is a plant that we can grow here, and I have grown, but it's also, mixed outcomes. So like this year, it didn't get very tall, but I've grown in my backyard where it's taller than me. And yeah, just thinking about how to be a good relative, a good sibling, and on these lands that are not my ancestral homelands, and also acknowledging that I may be rooted here and in another place, like going into the future. So what Jasmyn said, yeah, link up with your local indigenous like movements, indigenous led movements, and that's something that has grounded me, being welcomed by my Anishinaabe, Ojibwe aunties, spiritual aunties, not blood, who who support me and welcome me. Ooh. Oh, looks like I have to stop talking because there's a timer. Yeah, so that's been a part of my journey too. I'll pause there.
Yeah, similarly, also struggling a bit with this question. It's so broad, but I think that I can give an example of my family in South Carolina who is unable to receive the deed to their parcel of land that they received as sharecroppers outside of Charleston because of confusion with heirs property when my great aunt died, who was the last person that was living on that land. And the community that land is in is all like poor Black people that are being taken advantage of through eminent domain by the state government. And they are paying out neighbors to build a railroad through that land, so no one will have access to arable land in that community anymore, because they would rather have the $30,000 from the state than the land, because that money is offering immediate, if not long-term security for them, because they're in a state of emergency, because the system has placed them in a state of emergency and they have to feed their family instead of tending land to grow food, because that knowledge has also been lost through the state and through oppression and violence. And so I think that the way that our communities are going to become sovereign is through more intentional education of land stewardship, of ecosystem, of other than human kin, how we can be in relationship to these systems and to each other and to the earth. There is simply going to be no other way to build our brick by brick path to liberation than through political education and land stewardship education. I think that this is the only way that we can be mobilizing our communities and to teach the what is the phrase, like you can like teach someone how to fish, someone knows it. Like teach them how to fish, don't teach, like give them a fish, whatever it is. So that we can like build the long-term vision of liberation and not just the gifts of emergency which is grants here and there, which also James Beard would not hurt to have a few grants. Yeah, I think that that is one of the pathways we can take towards land sovereignty and then food sovereignty.
Thank you for that. How are we doing, Vanessa? How are we doing on time? Do we have any? I think maybe there was just a question in the chat.
We've got 3 questions. If you want to knock
Okay.
those out, how do you feel?
Yeah,
Okay,
let's go to, yeah.
sure. So from Ren, we have, I teach about food and farming to youth, and amongst all of our big world issues, climate change, food apartheid, colonialism, etc., what advice or inspiration do you have for this youth looking to be engaged for this work? Anyone can answer.
We go by each one teach one in our little realm, and I think that if there are youth that are interested in this work, to immediately get involved in local community farming organizations, guerrilla farm projects, food sovereignty mutual aid organizations even. I feel that a lot of, if this is an urban community, and if not rural community too, there's like so many mutual aid organizations that are involved within the food sovereignty web, whether that's farms or building a community fridge and maintaining the community fridge, starting to cook meals in your kitchen to give to that community fridge so they can have prepared foods and not just raw vegetables. There are so many ways to begin to learn from others, and then so you can then teach your community and your friends and your family how to do these things. So yeah.
I would add, I'm thinking about what a gift to hear of young people interested in this work. I have 2 young people that are less interested. We live together, and so they don't want to go to the land or the farm often. That's okay. They have other interests. And so I'm thinking of imagining young people who are interested. Maybe I would say, like, do you know what a mentor is? Like maybe like people that you see in your community, why don't you fill out, maybe choose a few to ask, like, would you be my mentor? And creating that relationship. And that is something that I wish somebody would have told me when I was younger. Just, I didn't even know about that word really until college.
Only thing I would add here is if they're in an urban setting, like really recommend checking out community gardens. A lot of them will have like elders that are in the space who actually need like youth to come out to help with some of that work and to share their wisdom.
Okay, we'll move to the next question. What kind of role do you see well-resourced organizations like JBF, etc., and all those with power?
Looks like Vanessa's on mute. Alex, do you mind reading that question, or I
Did I
can
not,
read it?
did I not read it all the
There
way?
you go. There you go. Could you reread
Oh,
that
I'm
question,
sorry.
Vanessa? That's
What kind
okay.
of role do you see well-resourced organizations like JBF and those with power and influence play in all of this?
I can go first. I think that for me, what's coming up is that it's I'm connected to organizations like this that have small or mid-sized grant opportunities that are very competitive. So it's kind of like the promise of the idea of a check coming in at some point in the future. I think that true allyship that I've been seeing more and more of like our bigger organization, are program officers who are going directly to their board to be able to have build connection between the board members and the organizations directly. So that way there might be bigger resources that can come more directly to the people that need it. I think the other part is just believing us when we're telling you our stories of like what's our lived experience. I get like feedback from funders sometimes where they're like asking me for if I'm like sure that I'm living the experience that I'm living, you know what I mean? And it's like just believe me when I tell you my story.
Thanks. Oh, Jasmyn.
No, y'all do your neighbor thing. I'm excited.
Thank you, Monti. Yeah, I mean, like the money, like it's really simple. I mean, because we are in a state of emergency, we are living under capitalism, we still need the money, and we know y'all got it. And so we do need more land gifting. We need more unrestricted funds, and a lot of them. We don't need any more grants that are based on these like finite grant deliverables, because we just need to be doing our work and feeding our communities. So we don't need that anymore. And we need you to be redistributing your resources and not just saying you're doing it and redistributing resources to bigger, more well-known, renowned farms, like Rocksteady, but smaller, grassroots, Black-owned, trans-led, disability justice focused, neurodivergent focused, sex worker oriented organizations that are here but don't get the money because they are not known. And so your responsibility is doing the research it takes to get the money to those people, because we know you have the resources to do that.
I would say use your power to do two things: mutual aid and technical assistance. Mutual aid, which means if you are speaking to funders, there should always be a part of whatever you're going for that's going outside, right? So if I'm asking for this amount, I want my funder to know I'm always going to be carrying this much for community. So wrap us into your day-to-day in a way that feels like sustainable mutual aid, and not philanthropy, right? Mutual aid is a politic. Philanthropy is the disparate. Yes, we love some spade over here. The distribution of wealth that has been hoarded, right? So really shifting our understanding even within the nonprofit sector to start moving in a way that is more in alignment with mutual aid. And then when it comes to technical assistance, the philanthropic sector is a place that people get degrees to participate in. So if you get degrees to participate in it, then there are extreme barriers of entry. And I think that it's really important that organizations start offering technical assistance that is hands-on. What does it look like for you to hire someone who just works with people to write grants for your organization? Or what does it look like to have lawyers that anybody who falls under your criteria for care or centering care can receive these services? I think it's really important to be a part of the infrastructure building by sharing skill sets. That's another part of queering our politic is sharing of skill sets. And so if you know that it requires a certain level of skill to participate in receiving sustainable funding, I think it's really important that we start to think about giving even outside of monetary means, and start to think about giving as also time and labor. It's also expertise. And so I think that those things can be really, really important.
Okay, final question. Let's see here, one more. How can we seek out local, queer BIPOC farms it's sourced from, and how can we best support them?
Is this like to source food?
I'm gonna assume so, yeah. Oh, for restaurants, they commented.
I'm going to say something similar about foundations. Wrap us into your planning. Make us a part of your planning in a way that shares your infrastructure. If you're running a restaurant, that means you got somebody who really knows some books. You got somebody who really knows paperwork. You got somebody who really knows structure, who knows how to apply for business loans. I would say wrap a small farm into your plan. I would love for someone to come over and be one day and just be like, hey, I want Alabama kimchi. What do you need to set up some cabbage? Like, and wrap me into your plans. I think when you're working with smaller folk, that would be really, really powerful to setting folk on a trajectory to building the systems they need operationally, and to not be left at the end of the road when they finally build their systems and have no place for distribution.
Yeah, along with that, I think that our movements are getting very siloed in like what we are all doing separately. Like there is the farm, and there is the education organization, and there is the chef that is like cooking the food. And the way that we are going to bring about transformation is by realizing that all of those things are interconnected, and our collective power is what is necessary, and sharing our resources so that we all don't have to like within our revolutionary web, we each have a role, and those roles are connected. Like we should not be playing all of those roles in our individual silos, because that's how burnout happens, and that's how we lose. So by like Jasmyn was saying, connecting resources within your small communities, and building power, that is sovereignty. So figure out a way to do that.
I'd love to add to this question, as this is something that a mutual aid project that we had started here locally, and at the onset of the pandemic, like we were asking, can we source, it was all volunteer run. It was called Ayuda Mutua, and it quickly became like its own ecosystem, and there was funds flowing. And so we had power, we had capacity to purchase. And so we were doing that from, local warehouses, and then wondering, can we purchase from local BIPOC farms? And it so happened that like there's not many in the area that are set up to sell at the level we were ready to purchase at weekly. But we learned, we had this question, and then we started seeking out and asking people, right? Like going to the farmers markets, asking our friends who coordinate the farmers markets, meeting people and them connecting us with others and following up on leads. And with one family, Full Circle Healing Farm, which is a Black-owned farm, we were able to purchase. We wanted to support them and also welcome in, fresh produce to local families. And so the way that we did that was we purchased 10 shares, like that's what they had left, like 10 CSA shares, and then we linked it to go to 10 families that had been most requesting like the bundles, like the food bundles that we were distributing. And so I would add like ask once you you find them, you're asking around, also like ask them, and like pay what they say, and maybe pay them more than that, because that's like another thing that I think a lot about is like these price points are ridiculous. Like you can't compare them to the grocery store. Even what people sell stuff at the farmers markets, like it's under, people need to be like paid more. There's a lot to say on that point. And how do we shift that? Like, how do we shift, especially while we're living under capitalism in these multiple crises? Where do we even get, how does the money flow, so that earth workers are not like underpaid? and that people can see the value when they go and they, like, all that was poured into growing those herbs, those carrots. The money really can't hold that value. But it's all relationship based is the last thing I was going to say. Everything is relationships. Tending the relationships is how we get where we're going.
If I could answer real quickly, to like piggyback off of that, just wanted to uplift that one of the programs out here at a place called Glenwood, they have like a food sovereignty fund actually that does a lot of the work that we're speaking to, where it's like the farms like at Rocksteady or Catalyst in the future, we can get paid full price by a foundation, and then our food access partners are able to get that food to distribute to their community for free. And so it sucks because as a farmer, people are always coming to us to ask us to give us their food, you know what I mean, for free to give to the community. And I'm always like, who's paying for it then? You know what I mean? Somebody has to be doing it. So that seems like a great place for the James Beard Foundation to be partnering with different groups to see if we can expand that model in different parts of the country.
Glenwood is a fantastic organization, and the work that I do with Fair Food Network supports technical assistance for those kinds of programs, for nutrition incentive, produce prescription. Jasmyn, I was thinking about that, your idea. So I'm gonna take that with me from this conversation of building those farms into those programs and providing capacity and infrastructure. I was actually in Montgomery for a Rural Grocery Summit in June. Had an amazing time, and just thinking about, and especially in rural areas, and thinking a lot about was just kind of how I started on my journey of doing this work, and thinking about queer people out there and just the connections, the infrastructure, developing those things. And you know, in those rural communities, it is a necessity of you know, having the systems in place. It's not just growing the food, it's aggregating it, it's keeping it cold and safe temperatures. And I know, Monti, a lot of your work too is also about developing and investing that infrastructure and building community wealth through that. And just how everything is, everything that we've been talking about today is, it's all connected, right? You can't separate out the food from the community. I just want to thank you all for sharing your time, your stories, your love and your care with us today. This was such a fantastic conversation. Thank you all. Thank you for growing food, for feeding your neighbors. And just take care. Wish you all well. It's fantastic to meet you all. Do we have any other final questions in the chat or thoughts? Anybody?
Where do we find you all? Please plug yourself.
Yes, please share.
You can find our collective, We Have Always Been Related, on Instagram, and we would love to connect there. You can also follow Queer Farmer Network on Instagram.
Rocksteady Farm is also on Instagram, and we also have a website. But yeah, thanks everybody. Really grateful, and free Palestine always.
I also see that Chachi and Monti and Jasmyn put their Instagram info in the chat. So any of you make sure that you collect that before signing off today. Unless you all, I want to give you the last moment if anyone wanted to plug anything else, and then I'll say our goodbyes before we end today's call.
I just want to share from Khalil Gibran that work is love made visible. And I want to thank all of our ancestors for all of the work that they've done. And thank you.
Well, on behalf of the James Beard Foundation, thank you so much to our moderator, Alex, and our panelists, Noah, Monti, Chachi, and Jasmyn. I've learned a lot. I obviously have a lot more to learn, and as does our foundation, and I think all of the other organizations that are involved that do this work in this industry. I look forward to following your organizations, following your work, and continuing to grow. Just as a reminder to everyone, this recording will be featured on JBF platforms as well as the Queer Food Foundation's platforms. It'll be featured on our website and on our virtual education library, which is on our YouTube. So if you didn't get to join us live, I hope that you'll take the time, take a little bit of an hour out of your time to really learn about these really important topics and issues that impact us all. With that said, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Bye, everybody.